Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, the Middle East and much of the world is still abuzz following the historic peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The deal, known as the Abraham Accords, was brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump. It calls for Israel to suspend plans for extending sovereignty to Judea and Samaria. The UAE will in turn establish full normalization of diplomatic relations with the Jewish state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the accord promises a wonderful future for the citizens of both countries and ushers in a new era of peace between Israel and the Arab world. Deputy Speaker of the Knesset and Chair of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, Sharyn Haskell, was quick to congratulate Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump for this significant achievement of normalizing ties with the United Arab Emirates. But she insisted this accomplishment cannot come at the expense of extending Israeli sovereignty throughout Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley. She added that Israel will only maintain peace and security by affirming its legal and historic rights to the land of our forefathers. Meanwhile, there's already talk that Bahrain, Oman, and Morocco may soon follow the lead of the UAE.
Israeli supermarket mogul Rami Levy is fed up with the anti-Israel bias of the United Nations Human Rights Council. Levy, who also owns a telecommunications corporation, has filed suit against the UNHRC for blacklisting his companies. In February of this year, the biased UN group released a settlement blacklist, falsely accusing 112 companies which operate in eastern Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the Golan Heights of violating international law by harming the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights of the Palestinian people. The goal of the UN Human Rights Council was to pressure businesses to end their operations in these areas or face a boycott. Shirat Adin, the legal organization that is representing Levy, filed a defamation suit against the UNHRC. Rami Levy said his employees are hired without distinction of race or religion or nationality, and that his staff, whether they are Israeli Jews or Palestinian Arabs, have equal rights. In fact, the average Palestinian Arab worker at Rami Levy stores earns 3 times the salary of Arab workers in the Palestinian Authority. Critics of the UN Human Rights Council point out that this is just another example of the body's anti-Israel obsession.
The United Nations Security Council has given the United States a stinging defeat in its attempt to extend the arms embargo against Iran. The U.S. and the Dominican Republic were the only 2 yes votes. Russia and China opposed extending the weapons ban, while 11 members abstained, including France, Germany, and Britain. The embargo is set to expire in October. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo expressed bitter disappointment, saying Iran will be free to spread even greater chaos and destruction. He said Israel and the 6 Gulf Arab nation states supported the extension, and they expected more from the Security Council. Pompeo vowed not to abandon America's friends in the region, reaffirming Washington's determination to see that the theocratic terror regime does not have the freedom to purchase and sell weapons that threaten the heart of Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu called the Security Council decision outrageous, adding that Iranian aggression and terrorism threaten regional peace and the entire world.
Israeli Air Force jets were back in the skies over Gaza following terrorist-launched rocket and incendiary balloon attacks on southern Israel. The Iron Dome missile defense system knocked down the projectiles, saving the civilian communities in southern Israel, which have been under relentless attack. The IDF responded by striking targets belonging to the Hamas terror group in Gaza. A weapons storage facility was hit, along with an underground infrastructure site. Tensions along the border fence boiled over when Palestinian rioters threw explosives at troops stationed nearby. Makeshift firebombs tied to balloons or kites ignited more than 100 fires during a week of unyielding attacks. In the past, Arab terrorists have attached books and toys to the airborne Molotov cocktails, hoping to lure children to the deadly devices.
A 19-year-old border police officer and a 58-year-old woman were wounded by a knife-wielding Arab terrorist near Lions Gate in Jerusalem's Old City. Both stabbing victims were treated at the scene and then transported to Hadassah Hospital on Mount Scopus. The 30-year-old terrorist was eliminated by police. There's been a general lull in terror activity in the capital. This is the first stabbing attack in nearly 3 months. And in an earlier incident, IDF soldiers shot and wounded a Palestinian terrorist who was about to throw a Molotov cocktail at Jewish worshippers near Rachel's tomb. The site, just outside of Bethlehem, is believed to be the burial place of the biblical matriarch.
The air forces of Germany and Israel are in the middle of a 2-week joint exercise dubbed Blue Wings 2020. It's the first time the IAF has participated with their German counterparts in the skies over Germany. It began with a flyover of the site where 11 Israeli athletes were murdered by Palestinian terrorists during the 1972 Olympics in Munich. A ceremony was also held at the Dachau concentration camp. An Israeli officer said, from a tactical level, the joint drill provides an incredible opportunity to learn from other air forces and train in unfamiliar territory and challenging conditions.
Lithuania has added its name to the growing list of countries to designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. The government in Vilnius confirmed that it had obtained information that Hezbollah uses terrorist means that pose a threat to the security of a significant number of countries, including Lithuania. Foreign Minister Lena Linkovic said they now stand together with the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and other countries that have reached the same conclusion. He thanked Israel's security agencies for their work in helping to ensure the safety of Lithuanian citizens. Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi welcomed Lithuania's decision, saying Hezbollah has imposed terror in large parts of Lebanon and turned them into Iranian protectorates while taking Lebanon citizens, its economy, and political system hostage.
Bible-believing Christians played a huge role in electing U.S. President Donald Trump in 2016, and he's counting on them again to ensure a second term in the White House. President Trump thanked evangelicals along the campaign trail for their support, and he told enthusiastic Christians that he moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem for them. President Trump said the evangelical community was even more excited about that historic decision than most Jews. It is a little-known fact that the majority of the attendees at the inauguration of the Jerusalem embassy were evangelical Christians.
Israel and the United States joined forces to conduct a test of the upgraded Arrow 2 missile. The air defense system passed with flying colors as it successfully intercepted a Sparrow target missile, simulating a long-range surface-to-surface rocket such as Iran's Shahab-3. Defense officials said the radar locked on the target and followed it the entire time before it was intercepted and completely destroyed exactly when it had been planned. They added that both the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems are capable of intercepting missiles with nuclear warheads. Prime Minister Netanyahu had high praise for the project, saying Israel has the strongest and most advanced defense and attack capabilities in the world, and our enemies know that we are prepared against any threat. We are living in mysterious yet miraculous times. We've witnessed the most remarkable fulfillment of biblical prophecy, the Jewish people's return to Israel, and the prosperity and contributions of this tiny country in such a short time. Yet we've also seen an unexpected rise in anti-Semitism, which takes the form of anti-Zionism and alliances between groups that are fighting against the most fundamental biblical values. In the book Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, Josh Reinstein answers important questions to clarify what has driven political action from the time that the Roman Emperor Titus destroyed Jerusalem until today, when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Get your copy today and learn how faith-based diplomacy has changed the world. To order your advance copy, go to triumphofisrael.com.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful Jerusalem studio. My guest today is Pastor Stephen Khoury. He's the president of Holy Land Missions. Pastor Khoury, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is Holy Land Missions.
I was born in Jerusalem, grew up in the city of Bethlehem, and the vision of Holy Land Missions is to bring the message of love, forgiveness, and grace to the Arab world, specifically to Arabs in the Holy Land, within Israel and within the Arab communities.
You're an Arab Israeli Christian. How is that being in Israel? Is that seen as a positive force? Is there any time that you feel that maybe this is something that you're being persecuted for here? How was your experience?
You know, Josh, that's such a good question because I grew up here most of my life, minus a few years of going to college in America. And I grew up in a culture where my father was known to be a man who, not only a man of the Word of God, but also a man that loved the Jewish people and loves the Jewish people and loves the Muslims, Christians, and so forth. But he stood for the message that the God of the Bible, the God of the Old Testament, is the same God of the New Testament, is speaking in different shapes, manners, and forms. That piled up on top of political destruction and political problems around you, it puts you in a position where you're always going to be on somebody's bad side. So we've grown up seeing a lot of good, a lot of bad, and but it's good to be standing and walking where Jesus walked.
You have congregations here in Israel, all over the land, and there are a lot of Christians who are standing with Israel, Arab Israelis who love the state of Israel and the people of Israel, but that's not always the case when it comes to your ministry in Bethlehem. You have First Baptist Bethlehem there, and your father and yourself have been targets of crazy hate campaigns just because you're saying that the God of Israel is the one true God. Yeah. Tell us a little about that.
You brought me back to my childhood because, you know, we grew up in a church services where during the 80s and early 90s where be sitting in service, people would come in the back doors with Molotov bombs in their hands and they throw the Molotov bombs at the church pews while people were worshiping and praying. And there were days where we'd have people come throw rocks and stones at the church community people while we were walking out the church doors, and we'd have buckets of water. We'd turn off the water, turn off the fire, get back to worshiping like nothing ever happened. And these are some of the small experiences we've had for taking a stand for something bigger than ourselves. And that's, again, going back, it's the message of the kingdom.
Your father has paid a very harsh price in Bethlehem for standing with Israel. He's been shot on several occasions and harassed. Why is it that the Palestinian Authority is so against the message of love and respect for all that your father is pushing?
What we've seen in the last 5-6 years, or what be it is, there are small groups within a larger movement that usually have control, whether it be of money, of wealth, of politics, of control, fear factor. And if we can always focus on these small groups that have hatred in their heart, or they benefit more from having destruction and so forth, and we can sort of point the flashlight on them and to show the local community that you have two options. You have violence, death, killing, bloodshed. And then you have the other option of sitting down and figuring out is what works, what doesn't work, and what can be done to really see peace be tangible in this country. And our focus has been the last 5 years is to focus on those within the PA that really know that violence doesn't work, terror hasn't worked, and they realize that the only way to really move forward is to find a common ground, to accept the fact that Jewish people are here, Arab people are here, at least for the meantime, and on that build for the future of how can we have our children have a safer future. And that's what we're focused on with the PA, targeting those that really know that peace can be possible and it has to be worked out. It comes at a price too.
Israel's the only place in the Middle East where the Christian population grows every year instead of decreases. Your churches are growing every year as well, and they're very prosperous, and people are coming to the churches and celebrating their faith. But just down the road in Damascus or on the other side of the border, we're seeing horrible massacres of the Christian community. How does it feel to be here in a free democracy and look over the side and see what's happening to Christians in the Middle East?
I am thankful to be in a place where I can still be a Christian. Yes, an Arab, but all a Christian. I'm thankful and grateful to God. Not only am I being able to walk as a Christian Arab freely, but also I'm in the place where our faith began. From a Christian perspective, at least. It's a place where the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he appeared to Moses. He appeared to his people. He walked the journey with them into the promised land. And being these two together, it's an honor, it's a privilege. And I look at the other side. We've helped Christians in Egypt. We've helped Christians in Iraq, both financially and in teaching Bible. We get a lot of requests from people in Egypt, Syria, Iraq, telling us, please send us some Bible teachings, teach us more, and be able to affect them in both communities through Holy Land Missions has been an honor, and we're blessed to be here and walk freely and be able to be a Christian.
One of the things that I'm noticing is that not just Bible-believing Christians like yourself and Baptist Christians, but also mainstream Christians and Catholics, what they call Aramaic Christians, are more involved in Israel, are standing more with Israel. We see the numbers of Arab Christians, Israeli Arab Christians going up in the military every year. What do you see as the future relations between the Arab Christian community and the wider Israeli community vis-a-vis the Jewish population?
I am very optimistic about the Arab Israelis living in the land of Israel, and I'm also between them and the Jewish communities, Israeli communities. I'm also optimistic about the Arab who call themselves Palestinian Arabs living in the West Bank communities, Judea, Samaria, and so forth. I am optimistic because they've been working on the Jewish side. They've had business with the Israelis. They work in Israeli companies, factories, hotels, and so forth, and they're realizing that really the only way to see a future is to accept the other as a human being, Ben Adam. We are the sons of Adam, and seeing that the only way to do it is to value you as a human being. And I'm optimistic. You asked me that question. I'm very optimistic. On the contrary, what the media tells you, there's always going to be ruckus and turmoil and demonstrations. There's always going to be that, whether it be here or globally. But there is still a remnant few, people like you and myself and others, who really understand that with covenant land comes covenant responsibility.
Yeah, we see in the media all the time that they're saying that Arab populations are very worried about what Donald Trump is doing here with the deal of the century, with the moving the embassy to Jerusalem. But on the ground, I've seen it being very positive. There's a lot of support by Israeli Arabs, especially in the Christian community, for Donald Trump. Where do you see the difference from what's being reported and what's actually happening on the ground?
You have two voices. You have the voice, the hidden voice, where a lot of Arabs in this land just say, we've tried both sides. We've tried the uprising, the intifada, the bloodshed, and that hasn't really done much for the younger generation. And then you have, so they are thinking the only way to do it is finding common ground. And then you have the other minute voice internally who want to speak out, who don't like what's going on, but then they have no other option. So they're staying silent because the only voice that's representing them is a voice that might not necessarily have the bigger view or the more positive view for all. And I think a lot of them are in a conundrum. It's what do you do if you say something, you're damned. If you don't say something, you're damned either. So and I think the younger generation, the younger Arab generation in this land, and I think that's much speaking for the young Israeli generation as well, is they're thinking of one thing. How can I make this country a beacon of light? What can I do to really, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Because it's good because it creates peace, but it's bad sometimes because sometimes you give up things that don't belong to yours. The covenant of God with Abraham and the promises of the Old Testament. These are things, something that nobody can change. It's God's given, and with that we walk on that and say, how can we be a beacon of light in a dark world?
There are literally tens of millions of people watching your show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message to them is to continue learning the Bible. Read the scriptures. Don't let your emotions lead the scripture. Let the scriptures lead your emotions or lead your values. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. There is a remnant of Arabs, a remnant of Jewish people that love God, that love peace. We need to do more from the Arab perspective. Jesus is the answer for the Arab world, and we want to do more in teaching Arabs to love their neighbors as themselves.
Thank you, Pastor Khoury, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom, and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren HaYesod. I'm Sam Grundwerg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. After 2,000 years, we found the descendants of the lost tribe of Dan. The Jewish people of Ethiopia need your support. Please join us in welcoming them home to Israel. God bless you from Jerusalem.
In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamath, and from the islands of the Mediterranean. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11. Through their deep faith, Roy and Yuklin Chen, a devout Bible-believing Christian couple from Hong Kong, received a sign from heaven revealing their personal mission in life to help realize God's promise to return the exiled people of Israel back to their ancestral homeland. 1 year after the historic and inspirational journey to Ethiopia, Roy and Yuklin Chen have witnessed the prophetic vision gathering momentum through the continuation of the Ethiopian Jewish community's Aliyah to Israel. Within the last year alone, some 1,400 Ethiopians have returned to Israel through the assistance of Keren HaYesod, but many more have yet to complete their journey.
To have the whole prophecy being lived out right before us was simply overwhelming. Not only was it difficult to see the people in the camps waiting to go back to Israel, but when Father God gave us a message to share with them, which was simply that Abba, Father, has not forgotten them, that every one of them will be brought back to their homeland. And to use a couple that's living on the other side of the world, doesn't even know where Cush is or what Cush is, that's the length that Father will go to reach his children.
Roy and Yuklin came to Bangkok to an event hosted by the Friends of Israel of Keren HaYesod. They were joined by 1,500 Christian worshipers who gathered to help the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy come true.
Now Israel is 70 years old. It is time that we bring Israel home so that we can join to our brothers and be one new man.
We believe it is our privilege, each and every one of us, the Gentiles, to rally around our brothers and sisters in Israel and to take part in what the Lord has already set in motion.
Roy and Yuklin know that their mission has only just begun and are committed to making sure that all the remaining Ethiopian Jews are brought home to Israel.
The biggest blessing is not that, oh, if I give, then I will get financial reward. The biggest blessing is to know that your God is real and he keeps every one of his promises. And every promise that is made to you is going to happen because he answered the prayers of his people and they are coming home, and you can be a part of it.
He will raise a banner from the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 12.
Together we will bring all our brothers and sisters back to Jerusalem.
Now is the time to act. There is still so much more we can do. Join the Chens and Keren HaYesod in this fulfillment of the biblical prophecy.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, we're expecting a massive wave of Aliyah from Jewish communities all around the world. Help us bring them home. Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
Well, today we usher in a new era of peace between Israel and the Arab world. I just came from an historic virtual conference between myself, President Donald Trump, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates. We announced the establishment of a full and formal peace between Israel and the UAE. It includes the mutual opening of embassies, direct flights, and many, many other bilateral agreements. This is the greatest advancements toward peace between Israel and the Arab world in the last 26 years, and it marks the third formal peace between Israel and an Arab nation. In 1979, Prime Minister Menachem Begin made peace with Egypt. In 1994, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin signed a peace treaty with Jordan. And today I'm honored to announce a formal peace agreement with the United Arab Emirates. I believe there's a good chance we will soon see more Arab countries joining this expanding circle of peace. I want to thank President Trump for his critical help in brokering this historic accord. And I want to thank him for his revolutionary vision for peace, which is the most realistic and important formula for peace in the region. President Trump's Middle East plan served as a basis for today's historic peace announcement. Israel and the UAE are two of the most advanced countries in the world. Together, we'll transform the region and forge an even better future for our people. This is a future of peace, a future of security, and a future of prosperity. I've always believed that we could establish peace with the Arab world, and I've been working towards that lofty goal for decades. You may not know it, but I've been doing it all the time, in meetings that are publicized and in many that are not. In Washington, in the Middle East, in daylight, and in nighttime. In recent years, Israel, under my leadership, has made advancement with ties with such countries as Sudan, Oman, Bahrain, and other nations in the Gulf. I have reason to be very optimistic that today's announcement with the UAE will be followed by more Arab nations joining our region's circle of peace. And to the people of Abu Dhabi and its leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, I say, Salam alaikum, Shalom aleichem, peace unto thee, peace unto all of us. Thank you.
Lift up your eyes and look around. All your children gather and come to you. The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Anti-Semitism threatens many of the Jews. We must rescue them before the window of opportunity slams shut. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all of your Israel updates.